English grammar and arithmetic. Adolescent years would have included instruction in geometry, geography, bookkeeping and surveying, and would have culminated in a year or two studying abroad in England. Unfortunately, when he reached the age of 11, his father died, and George's formal education ended. From what little we do know of his education, Washington excelled in mathematics and surveying. As George grew into a young man, he found it increasingly difficult to tolerate his domineering mother, and spent most of his time away from home, studying surveying or spending time with his stepbrothers, especially Lawrence. Becoming the ward of his eldest half-brother, George relished spending time at Lawrence's Mount Vernon estate. Lawrence eagerly assumed the role of mentor, aiding and encouraging George's studies. More importantly, Lawrence introduced his young charge to the sophisticated world of the Virginia gentry. It was during this time that George captured the interest of the powerful Fairfax family, into which Lawrence had married. With most of his late father's estate being inherited by his older half-brother, George decided to pursue surveying as his profession. It was a respectable occupation for someone of his social rank, approximately the same status as a doctor or lawyer. In 1748, George joined a surveying expedition into western Virginia at the invitation of Lord Fairfax, a land baron and his brother's father-in-law. Impressed with his skills and work ethic, the Fairfax family secured George an appointment as a county surveyor. By the age of 17, he was operating his own surveying business. In the following years, he crossed and recrossed the Appalachian Mountains, mapping the far reaches of the American wilderness for weeks at a time. He began buying up favorable lands, gradually taking his first steps toward becoming one of Virginia's wealthiest men. George Washington's first profession, then, entailed the measuring, understanding, and, incrementally, the realizing of the American landscape. The years 1752 to 1753 marked a turning point in his life. Lawrence contracted an aggressive strain of tuberculosis. Hoping that the tropical climate would help his condition, he traveled to Barbados, accompanied by George. While there, George contracted a case of smallpox, which may have left him sterile. Lawrence's health did not improve. He returned to Mount Vernon and died in 1752. George was made executor and, at the age of 20, residuary heir of one of the best estates in Virginia. With this turn of fate, he no longer needed to survey professionally, and turned his attention instead to the running of his various farms and execution of his new duties as an adjutant general in the Virginia militia. Prior to entering the military, his brother Lawrence held Virginia's single position of adjutant. After Lawrence's death, 4 military districts were created, each needing an adjutant that would be responsible for recruiting and training troops. Seeing a chance to enhance his status in the colony, in 1753 Washington rode to Williamsburg, Virginia's capital, and petitioned Governor Dinwiddie for an appointment. George had no military training, except for having read 2 books on the art of warfare, but stood nearly 6 feet 3 inches tall, enormous by 18th century averages, and weighed about 220 pounds. Impressed with the young man's presence and spirit, Dinwiddie appointed him adjutant to one of the 4 military districts. French and Indian War. Virginia was, at the time, part of the 13 colonies of America. These were under the extended colonial governance of King George II of England, who reigned until his death in 1760, when his grandson, King George III, succeeded. In this part of British North America, the colonies had their own systems of local self-government, but the George II and George III ministries nevertheless defended their North American territory jealously against fellow colonialists France and Spain. As George Washington joined with Governor Dinwiddie, relations between...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.